I always advocate for universal policies, okay? But when you bring that up, when you bring up universal policies, like one of the greatest examples during 2016 and in 2020 was the way that Democrats counter-messaged against Bernie Sanders. That's what I'm talking about, okay? When they counter-messaged against Bernard Sanders, they did it on the virtue of Bernie bros, Bernie bros, Bernie bros are dangerous, Bernie bros are bad, Bernie bros are misogynistic, Bernie bros are sexist. And that was effectively a way to weaponize identity politics in the silliest fucking ways possible against a dude who was advocating for universal policies. Now, why is that significant? One of the things that really frustrated me, and there's videos of this back when I was covering during like the agitative propaganda, when I had the show called Agitprop on TYT, I talked about this extensively. One of the things I covered was Bernie Sanders' policies on universal alleviation of poverty, okay? Bernie Sanders had a lot of universal policies. Bernie Sanders had a lot of universal policies that would overwhelmingly target black and brown communities, right? But he never actually said he was overwhelmingly and directly targeting black and brown communities. And the media would consistently turn around and say things like, well, where's your criminal justice reform? You're not talking about criminal justice reform. He was, right? Of course he was. But once again, the idea that liberals presented was the only way to cut policy for black people is by talking about how you're going to get black people out of prison, which is inherently a fucking insanely racist way to approach the subject. Okay. What do you think? Who do you think gets helped with policies that destroy poverty? Okay. Policies that combat poverty. Who do you think gets helped more? Poor people. And black people and brown people in general live in underserved communities are represented in a higher percentage in those groups. Okay. That's it. That's it. The idea that the only way to talk about black people in the legislative side is by talking about fucking criminal justice is insane. Obviously, criminal justice reform plays a major role, and Bernie Sanders had that in his platform as well. But the notion that like the only way to talk about black people, the only way to do good policies against black people is either by targeting black small business owners in the way that Kamala Harris was trying to do, or rather by simply talking about like criminal justice reform is insane. That was very frustrating to me as someone who looked at the situation in South Carolina with Jim Clyburn and how Jim Clyburn was like anti-Bernie. And a big part of the reason why Jim Clyburn was anti-Bernie was because he was backed by the fucking the same for-profit insurance companies that were giving him a ton of money. I think Democrats outwardly talk about how diversity for diversity's sake is actually a solution, but they have more insidious ways of vilifying men of all races. You need to shift people's focus away from fighting for crumbs between races to fight for the actual pie against the ruling class. Exactly. Democrats won't do that because they are designed. They are designed.
Senator Sanders, I do want to put...
Yeah, here. They are, the Democratic Party is designed as a hurdle against actual progressive policies, against anti-capitalist measures.
The same question to you, Senator Sanders. What message do you think?
I'll answer that question, but I wanted to get back to the issue of climate change for a moment, because I do believe this is the existential issue.
Senator, with all respect, this question is about race. Can you answer the question as it was asked?
I certainly can.
Like, this is a perfect demonstration. Look, let's do it again.
Senator Sanders, I do want to put the same question to you, Senator Sanders. What message do you think?
I'll answer that question, but I wanted to get back to the issue of climate change for a moment, because I do believe this is the existential issue.
Senator, with all respect, this question is about race. Can you answer the question as it was asked?
I certainly can, because people of color, in fact, are going to be the people suffering most if we do not deal with climate change.
That's it. Universal policies are incredibly important, because speaking about these policies from the perspective, speaking about these policies from the perspective of universality is great, because one, you don't alienate any demographics by doing so, with the exception of the rich, I guess, and that's fine. But you also are addressing issues that impact these communities directly, okay? Like, who do you think benefits more? Who do you think benefits more from Medicare for all? A rich white person or a poor black person? Overwhelmingly, these communities that are poorer on average will benefit more from universal programs. That's it. Same with climate change, same with everything. But it's very frustrating that Democrats are allergic to this kind of messaging. Even if it's fucking performative, they're allergic to it. They love the performance of like attacking people. So do you attacking people that do take the universal approach? So do you understand? Do you understand what I mean when I say the Democrats did this to themselves for years and years and years? Do you get it? That's it. That's what I'm talking about when I said like the way that they presented themselves is like they tried to posture as though like universal policies are actually racist, or anything that helps like white men is actually racist. And it's really stupid because the racial depolarization has already taken place, so it doesn't even fucking matter. Like here, Kamala doing pretty poorly among both black and Indian voters, and an underrated blow to the IDPOL theory of electoral politics, specifically the idea that Biden Hillary's weakness with non-whites compared to Obama was just about him being black and them being white. Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this extensively as well. Obviously, a hill I will die on is the Democratic response to 30 million people participating in the George Floyd protests is responsible for a large chunk of nihilism and detachment we see in our politics today. Yeah, I think the first wave of nihilism and detachment came under the Obama administration, and the final blow was delivered by the final blow. It's death by 1,000 cuts, but big blows came along the way. I think it was a major blow to all of the progress, all the hope, all of the grassroots momentum that was designed to play a significant role in American politics on the Democratic side, on the progressive side, under the Obama Hope and Change campaigning versus like how he actually performed at the executive level, and then obviously Hillary Clinton cutting away at Bernie Sanders in 2016 played a major role in causing discontent amongst the base, causing people to say "fuck this, I don't care about this at all," and then the final death blow was delivered when Joe Biden won. Okay, 75% of the country was like on board with the police precinct being burned down in the immediate aftermath of the execution of George Floyd, okay, in broad daylight. Think about that. They understood and sympathized with an action that is insane, okay, that you would never expect from Americans. I say this all the time. People that had their first foray into political action did everything. They mobilized, they engaged in direct action, they protested, they fucked shit up, they yelled in the streets. And then when push came to shove, they turned around, they held their nose, and they voted for Joe Biden. They thought this is going to move the needle in the right direction. So what happened? Did we move in the right direction? No, of course not. Democrats spent most of that campaign shitting on the activist base, then turned around and still continued to vilify the defund the police movement is wrong and bad and whatever. Instead of trying to understand where this resentment was coming from and try to find like a reasonable path forward, they just actively tried to run away from their base again and again and again. That's it. That's it. And look where we're at now. Of course, that's going to cause a lot of nihilism. Of course, it's going to cause a lot of nihilism. For so many people, this was their first foray into mass action. They were met with no even the most meager of positive changes, but instead a party who vowed to fund the police more and shit on their slogans at every opportunity. Way to teach a generation that nothing you will do will ever change anything. Yeah. And then there's always a synopsis after the fact where people will turn around and go like, they'll do an autopsy, right? And you see that even today where people are like, crime is down. It's actually better than it's ever been. So why are people freaking out about crime? Okay, here, this is like all the data scientists, like the statistics urban, like data scientists who are oftentimes like very firmly committed to liberalism. Crime has declined significantly since its peak in the early 90s, yet today 63% of Americans say crime in the US is extremely or very serious, a 7-point increase from 1996 when actual crime rates were nearly twice as high. Homicide has been a bit more tricky, but the murder rate is still about half of what it was in the 80s and 90s, only very slightly higher than the 60s. Now, maybe the crime in the US can still be called serious. And yes, it can be. Of course it's serious. America's a very violent nation. And I've been on this. I've been on the propaganda front fighting against the sea of lies for years at this point. And this is the easiest way to describe it. Apps like Nextdoor, Citizen, and Ring make people hysterical and make them think crime is ever present and nonstop happening. The crime panic wave from the media designed to boost cop credibility post Black Lives Matter protests is obviously another reason why people were like, oh my God, it's happening all the time. It's happening all the time. It's happening nonstop, you know? And then last but not least, the most visible version of crime is homelessness. And when homelessness skyrockets in big cities, in blue cities, that's where you saw major drop-offs from the Democratic Party, okay? Like, this is the other side of the story. A lot of people go, oh, well, Kamala didn't, like, underperform that significantly in rural areas or in, like, in states with, like, larger rural populations and whatnot. She actually, in comparison to Joe Biden, significantly underperformed in big cities. And that problem is twofold. One, because a lot of rich people have been radicalized into thinking that crime is literally ever present and someone is going to rape and kill your entire family any moment. So we have to do Nazi-style policies and melt the working poor and specifically kill every homeless person. Okay? And on the other front, all the poor people that normally would go out and vote that are infinitely more progressive than the Democratic Party itself are just going, why the fuck would I vote for you guys? You guys are not doing shit for me. It is burning the candle on both ends. All I hear here in Philly, yeah, Philadelphia is a fantastic example of this because Larry Krasner was the method, okay? Larry Krasner is the method for progressive DAs in the entire country. He was singled out as like the worst one. And Fox News constantly talked about how he was letting rapist decapitators go wild on the streets. Larry Krasner, unlike many of these other progressive DAs that got quickly dealt with in places like San Francisco and whatnot, was able to consistently, despite the undemocratic initiatives presented by the Republicans in the state of Pennsylvania, was able to overcome these issues. He was able to overcome the propaganda. He was able to overcome the numerous attacks. He was even able to overcome this undemocratic way of trying to unseat him in the past. They tried to do that too, okay? He just destroyed his challenger last week, and Philadelphia is a shining, bright, shining light in terms of eviscerating crime statistics, okay? He's done a phenomenal job, at least by every fucking metric, in terms of dealing with crime. How did that happen? How the fuck did that happen? It's because he was not allowed, he did not allow to be cooed.